thought I'd share this with you quickly. This is sort of hot off the press, so nobody's really seen this information yet. But this is where we're at for eating breakfast. We're pleasantly surprised. You can see here, the blue is the boys, the orange is the girls, right? So 2/3 of the boys are 60. Oh, it's exactly 2/3. So 66.6. Can't get any closer than that. So 2/3 of the boys have a breakfast every day, and just under half of the girls have breakfast every day. And you can see way over on the left there, 7% of them, of the boys never have a breakfast, and 11.5% of the girls never have a breakfast. So obviously a bit of room for improvement, but not too bad, right? So we have to do a bit more work in this, right? But these are just kind of what we call the frequencies, or the raw frequencies. Who's the amount of who's doing what. There's some data here on about who's skipping lunch. Not terribly interesting to show you there. Do they eat, 5 portions fruit veg a day? Pretty spread out, really. 14-15% never do, but how many adults do? I'd say it's similar. And then you can see once a month and so on. And every day, not too bad. What's that? 1 in 6 nearly of kids are, eating a lot of fruit and veg every day. So great, right? Probably room for improvement, but nothing as scary as we thought maybe it would be. Okay, and then this one you might find interesting, right? So do you eat a meal with your parents or carers? And this is good as well. So you can see, like half of our kids do it every day. It's great. And 3/4 of them, it's every day, or more than half the days in the week. So you could say 3/4 of our kids, more than half of them eat with their parents. More than 3/4 of them eat with their parents more than half days a week. So that's, all that's good. Now life of course will get in the way. Some parents can't get home. It's just impossible. You're eating out of the microwave, things like that. So the shifts and all the rest. I'd say a lot of what we're looking at there is to do with, it just can't be done, right? But if for example we went and cross-tabulated this data, right, which we probably will, but it's a pretty good proxy. There's questions in there about, do you get on with your parents? How's life at home? It's easy to get caring more from your parents and so on. But if you put this in as a proxy, right? So it's a proxy for spending time with your kids. The kids who are eating having a meal with their parents every day, or those ones that are eating, regularly having meals with their parents, are going to be doing better in all sorts of other ways. There will be a very close correlation to all sorts of other stuff based on those 75% compared to the other 25%. I can pretty much guarantee it. Now, this is another one that you could say, you prepare a meal with your parents or carers. And again, what is it, 9.5, 10% or so do so every day, same between boys and girls. And those kids on the right there, the kids on the right-hand side, they're going to be doing better because they're spending time with their parents. It's quite an interesting thing to know that the more time kids spend with their parents, the better they do. It's tricky when they're teenagers, of course, but that's the case. Okay, so anyway, I've rabbited on a fair bit, but I just want to give you a bit of a background about what this is really all about, right? And I expect an awful lot of the parents that are here, right, are going to be hugely interested in the topic of healthy eating because they're struggling at home, right? But what we're always trying to do with the Planet Youth Project is give you some information. If you have kids in the west of Ireland in our schools, and I know there's people here from all over the country, but if you have kids in Galway, Mayo, Roscommon, I'd like to think that the Planet Youth Project will actually improve the landscape for your kids and help improve long-term outcomes for your kids.
Thanks a million for that, Emmet. Very interesting points there about the data, and also, I suppose, what Planet Youth is trying to achieve. And I suppose, the simple ways we can do this maybe through parent power. So this evening is all about healthy eating habits. So I'm just going to share my screen, first of all, and get started. Okay, so we're going to talk about this evening how we feed our kids rather than focusing really on what we feed our kids. Okay, so just to give you a kind of idea of what's coming up over the next while, very briefly, we're going to talk very simply about what and when should our children eat, some of the effects of poor diets very quickly, why children's diets can get worse over time, problems I see regularly in my practice when parents come to me with their kids, for example, frequent snacking, and some solutions. How do we create more positive meal times? It's a big challenge in many houses. How do we avoid pressure around eating? Again, a lot of kids will feel pressure, and that will negatively affect their eating, even though, we don't mean to apply pressure, and we're doing the best, obviously we can, or we're trying to do the best always, and we want to do the best for our kids. Very often, I suppose, question I get asked is, how do we expand our children's diet if it's quite limited? I talk a little bit about eating with distractions. So like screens, I'll have a very quick focus on breakfast and packed lunches. And I'll also talk about, again, briefly, what a positive relationship with food looks like for our children. What is it that we're looking to achieve? And then it might be easier to know how to, get there. And I'll just share 2 useful images at the end. Okay, so what should our children eat? As I said, we're not focusing that much on what our children eat so much this evening as how we feed them. But that is a question. At the end of the day, it's about eating. And what do we feed our children? So in 3 words, I think the answer to this question is what we eat. Okay, so if we as parents or caregivers eat a fairly balanced diet, varied, some whole grains, fruit, veg, proteins, then that's what we need to get our kids on board with. And that avoids scenarios that I often see again in my practice. For example, where parents feel they have to make 2 separate dinners because the parents or whoever will eat one dinner and then others won't eat that and they have to make a separate dinner. So that's twice the work. And, that's something to be avoided if possible. And, a different solution really needs to come into play. Okay, so when should our children eat? Something kind of related. Again, keeping it really simple. 3 words, when they're hungry. Now, that kind of ties in with the idea of intuitive eating for children. So it's not just for adults. So what, you might hear a lot about intuitive eating these days. So what exactly does it mean? So it's basically, in theory anyways, it's eating when we're hungry. And it's stopping when we're satisfied or when we're no longer hungry. So again, the theory is very easy. But the challenge is implementing this in practice, not just for our children, but for all of us. And if more of us mindfully ate or intuitively ate or ate just when we were hungry, the world, I think, would have a lot less problems. So it's how do we, achieve this? Okay, just very briefly, things I see in my practice, effects of poor diets. I suppose sometimes it can be easy to kind of think, it doesn't matter that much maybe what we eat. But I would see a lot more constipation, for example, in children that have limited diets. So they may be eating no fruit or veg, or very little fruit or veg, maybe lots of carbs, maybe lots of white carbs, the white pasta, white breads, not taking enough liquid like water. So they definitely are more constipated than kids who would have more balanced diet. Of course, our diets can affect our kids' immunity. Some children will pick up anything that's going, coughs, colds, infections, and they may also take longer to recover, or they may need more kind of intervention like antibiotics to recover. Of course, diets can affect growth. Parents will come to me with concerns about children who are underweight or who have difficulty putting on weight or who are very kind of small for their age or compared to their peers. And also, parents will come to me about concerns that their children maybe are overweight or that if they continue eating as they are, that they may become overweight. And even like the effect of a poor diet, we'll call it, short term, this idea of blood sugar roller coaster, probably lots of you have heard about it. So this is just a little diagram. So in the bottom blue line is when we eat. So let's say most of our children eat breakfast or half of them or whatever, and the morning snack, the lunch, kind of the norm, let's say, for many children. And then on the left is the sugar in our blood. So obviously when we eat, the sugar in our blood increases and then that reduces over time. And the problem is if it gets too low. So these kind of red areas or the red lines shows that our blood sugar has become too low, and that has definite, I think, significant effects that are very apparent on possibly our children's mood and their energy and their attention. So we don't want, to get into the red. We want to stay more in the blue area. So we want more balanced blood sugar levels. And that's kind of more, we'll say, short-term effects of poor diets. But there are long-term effects as well. And it can be difficult to see these, I suppose, because we're just, something down the road. It's hard to know, well, what's going to happen. So this is a really interesting study. I think it's fascinating. It was done recently, and it just looked at one thing, which was high sugar diets in early life. So it tracked children, and it looked at their consumption of sugar. There were some who had high sugar, and it was able to look at these same children and the outcomes even 50 years later. So as I said, this is, I think, a fascinating study. So it looked at, in the UK, during the war times, there was rations. So there was a lot less sugar available. And then after the war, the rations ended. So there was a lot more sugar available and a lot more consumed. So they found, I'll just go on to the next screen. I blew it up a little bit. So this kind of reddish line, purpley, reddy, pink line is the sugar level. So it was lowish, and then it doubled, and with the rationing when it ended, and then it stayed high. So just go back again for a second. So what effect does high sugar intake have for children in early life, long term? So it found that high sugar intake in early life significantly increased the prevalence or the amount of, for example, diabetes by 50%. So that simply means for the children who participated in the study and had a high sugar intake early in life, they had twice the likelihood of developing diabetes years later. So, the saying, you are what you eat, I really do believe that, there is effects of what we're eating, whether it's short term or long term.